Aloha, inspired moneymakers. Welcome to another episode of Inspired Money, where we explore financial strategies to help you live a richer and more fulfilling life. I'm your host, Advisor Andy, and today we're talking about generational wealth. Money can no doubt be a complex issue, and it's not talked about enough, both outside of our families, but even within our families. Here's a fact that might surprise you. 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation, and a staggering 90% lose it by the third. I think our panelists will fact check me on that, but I did find that online. I hope those are good numbers. And what it tells is a story that creating wealth is one thing, but keeping it, growing it, and passing it on successfully is a whole different challenge. Whether you're looking to secure your family's financial future or build a lasting legacy, the truth is, wealth doesn't just take care of itself. It requires strategy, values, and a plan that goes beyond the numbers. In today's episode, we're going to reveal the secrets to building wealth that lasts beyond our lifetime, not just for you, but for your children and their children. You're going to learn how to pass down not only money, but also knowledge, values, and traditions that will help your family thrive for generations. And then make sure you stay with us to the end, because we're going to break down actionable strategies to help you pass on more than just assets. We'll show you how to create a lasting legacy that aligns with your family's values and goals. From estate planning to fostering financial literacy in younger generations, today's conversation will arm you with tools to build, preserve, and transfer wealth across generations. Before we dive in, this episode is brought to you by my financial advisory firm, Runnymede Capital Management. Whether it's saving for a home, college, or your retirement, plotting your financial goals and documenting a financial plan can be helpful. I invite you to do a 3-minute plan by going to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. Just take 3 minutes, because a little planning goes a long way, and it's a great introduction to see what a financial plan can do for you. You'll get an immediate output, and I'm happy to review it with you and point you in the right direction. Now, let's welcome in our incredible panel of experts with us today. I'll start with Jay Hughes. He's a global authority on family governance, and I hope he will share his insights on building and maintaining human and intellectual capital within family legacies. He's a 6th-generation counselor at law, now retired, author and co-author of multiple books like Family Wealth, Keeping It in the Family. Welcome, Jay. So glad to have you here.
Andy, thank you. And I'll start off by just saying wealth means well-being.
I like it. That's a good start. We have Kirby Rosplock here, a PhD. She's founder and CEO of Tamarind Partners, a leading family office consultancy. She's a recognized expert in family wealth management, known for her books, The Complete Family Office Handbook and The Complete Direct Investing Handbook. She's also Chief Learning Officer and founder at Tamarind Learning. Kirby, you know Jay very well.
Yes, I am so thrilled to be here. It's wonderful. And this is a topic near and dear to my heart, because legacy and wealth transfer are completely in my wheelhouse. And it's something I'm working on every day with families, family offices, and helping bridge these transitions, because that is a big struggle.
Yeah, the numbers bear that out. We have Andrew Howell. He's co-founding partner of York Howell and co-author of Entrusted, Building a Legacy That Lasts, specializing in estate planning, asset protection, and holistic wealth transfer strategies for high net worth individuals. Andrew, welcome.
I appreciate being here. It's really an honor. This is an illustrious panel. I mean, Jay is, as my law partner David York calls him, the godfather of family values planning. So it's really a pleasure to present with everybody.
I'm glad that you're here, and I'm excited to have all of you. Rounding out our panel today, we have Rabbi Daniel Lapin. He's a renowned author and financial expert, best known for his best-selling book, Thou Shalt Prosper, which combines ancient Jewish wisdom with modern financial principles to help people build wealth and lasting legacies. Rabbi Lapin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andy. Good to be with you all.
Well, Indeed, this is an illustrious panel. I'm excited to jump right in. So let's do that. We're going to start with segment 1.
Financial literacy within families requires active participation from all members to build a lasting legacy. Teaching children about money from an early age equips them with the skills to make informed financial choices. Programs like the FDIC's Money Smart offer accessible resources for young people to learn about saving, budgeting, and responsible spending. Parents can support this by involving kids in daily financial decisions, like creating a household budget or setting savings goals for a family purchase. Regular family meetings are essential for discussing financial goals and plans, fostering transparency and building trust. Give everyone a chance to understand the family's financial direction and contribute to setting shared goals, such as saving for a vacation or a future investment. Using tools like budgeting apps and online educational resources can further enhance financial knowledge across the family. By actively engaging in these practices, families can build a strong foundation for financial success that spans generations.
Jay, if you can kick us off, you've advised families for over 5 decades. Can you talk about, like, who are we addressing when we talk about wealth transfer? How much money do you need to have? And then maybe some general lessons from the Rockefeller family that we can all learn from.
Well, Andy and co-panelists, what a treat to be here and a privilege. First of all, let me say that the word wealth means well-being, comes from an Anglo-Saxon 2 words, wealth, you still have it in commonwealth and commonweal. The core, Andy, is that families understand wealth is well-being, and then determine what that means. Financial capital is simply a support, I view, to growing 4 qualitative capitals: spiritual, social, intellectual, and human. So the question of literacy, to me, is a question of not financial literacy entirely, but rather well-being literacy. Can we know our spiritual purpose? Can we make good decisions with each other? Are we a learning system? And are we thriving human beings? Those are the questions that I ask families about their wealth, and that enable them to consider that their wealth is their well-being and the well-being of each other. And I would add that what I hope they grow is the ability to enhance each other's journeys of happiness, because it is in that way that a family flourishes and in turn becomes a part of a flourishing society.
How did you start with that philosophy and belief? Because I think as an industry, there's often a focus on the financial and not the other legs of the chair, so to speak.
Well, perhaps all of us would know, but I had a very good midlife crisis. I'm not about to give you testimony this morning. But in that crisis, I decided that the problem of being an expert, which I was, I suppose, in the financial integration questions, didn't seem to help. What did seem to help is when I was entrusted by a family to get into the question of who it was, who they are, what their purpose was. And as I began to discover that purpose was the enhancement of each other's journey of happiness, I found my feet. I found my calling. Again, I want to say that is not to say financial capital is not useful. And let's just illustrate this very quickly, because there are many others who want to speak. But when I sit with families and I put my hand out like this, Andy, this is financial capital. This is human, intellectual, social, and spiritual. The hand is a great gesture. The problem is when the financial capital is leading, the other fingers disappear. And by the way, you fall right into the statistic that you offered this morning. When you turn your hand upside down and financial capital is rooted in the earth and nourishing, and it's growing your spiritual, your social, your intellectual, and human capitals, the qualitative capitals, now you have a journey to make. That isn't a discovery, that's ancient wisdom.
I like that. A simple hand gesture explains a lot. Andrew, can you talk about, give us some background. When we talk about wealth transfer, like there's a very big difference between the Rockefeller family and the Vanderbilt family.
Yeah, this is I think a generational shift that's occurred, and you have to think about it from the human experience. I mean, a lot of financial planning and estate planning techniques grew up since the Great Depression. And when people were going through the Great Depression, they weren't eating, right? We all went through the Great Recession and we were all unhappy, but my grandfather, who was this really important person in my life, had this saying that I always loved, which is that money isn't everything, but it sure quiets the nerves, right? So if you're sitting in a soup kitchen line waiting to try to feed your family, you don't know where the paycheck is coming at all. Financial assets became really, really important. And so you come out of the Great Depression, people have some money in the bank, they're not worrying about that any longer. That was their safety, right? We as human beings, we're searching out safety. We want comfort. And so all of the estate planning in my world has been really predicated on how can we bundle up the assets and pass them on to the next generation without any kind of real thought about the impact that those assets make. And over the next 40 years, we're going to have the largest wealth transfer, 70 to 90 million, or excuse me, $1 trillion that's going to be transferred from one generation to the next, almost entirely unharnessed. Or even if somebody does have an estate plan, it just says, look, we're going to dump, divide, and defer it and dissipate it onto the next generation. Absolutely unharnessed. So a family like the Rockefeller family, or we actually like the Rothschild family more as an example, they really put purpose as the centerpiece, rather than looking at sort of the matriarch and patriarch standards, family view. It's how can we put purpose, and what is the legacy that our family is going to leave on this planet, and let's make that the nucleus of the family. I mean, right now, most of my planning, or not my planning, but planning that I see, really puts mom and dad at the nucleus. They're the center, and kids are radiating off and so forth and building their own families. But mom and dad die, everybody goes off into orbit. So the idea here is, okay, we're going to put family purpose and values at the centerpiece, and then when mom and dad die, that's still holding the family together. They're having Thanksgiving dinner with each other the next year, right? So that's, I think, the difference between like the Vanderbilt family, who just kind of squandered it, right? 70 years after Cornelius Vanderbilt passed away, there wasn't one of them that was in the top top 30 most wealthy members of the planet, right? The people on Earth. 100 years later, they have this reunion at Vanderbilt University, and not one of the Vanderbilts that showed up was a millionaire. So that's the difference: is how can you really direct that wealth to create purpose and extend the purpose within the family.
So I think as we discuss this topic, looking at the hand and having, intellectual, human capital, the different aspects, I think that applies to anyone, right? But Andrew, in terms of the estate planning, do we look at the estate tax? Like, is there a dollar amount that we're like, who does this apply to?
So just to answer your question real directly, under current law, which is still the Trump tax reform, love him or hate him, that's what the law is right now tax-wise. Everybody at their death can give 13.61 million away tax-free, the estate tax, right? This estate tax, just for the listeners, is this federal tax, and then some states have it at the state level as well. But if you're too successful at death, they're going to try to tax you again. And I consider myself a tax attorney, and I hate taxes. And I think that's a good thing. If you work with a tax lawyer that loves taxes, get out of their office, right? Wrong lawyer to work with. But, I think that dealing with this estate tax is a whole nother moral problem for me, because it's a secondary tax on assets you've already paid taxes on: income taxes, property taxes, sales taxes. And then at your death, if you're too successful, which I've never understood taxing success, but if you're too successful, they're going to tax you again. Now, again, under current law, 13.61 million, either during life or at death, can go estate tax free. So as a married couple, that's 27.22 million right now. But every dollar above that goes to kids would be subject to a 40% tax. So not a lot of people have positive net worths at that level. The issue, though, is where are we going with taxes? And the way that I'm viewing the world, at least right now, is the government is not going to need less money in the future. And I think taxes are going to go up. And when I started practicing law, the amount you could give estate tax free was only $600,000 per person. 1.2 million as a married couple with the 50% tax on anything over and above. And I'm not telling you which way to vote, but a lot of my clients become pretty conservative when it comes to tax time. And so there could be a change here because the Trump tax reform is set to expire in 2026. If Congress doesn't extend it, it's going to go away, and we go back to the Obama days, which would mean about 5 million per person, adjusted for inflation. So it's more like 7 per person or 14 million as a married couple, with a 35% tax on anything over and above. But again, we don't know where that's going to wind up, and this pendulum of politics is going to shift back and forth throughout our lives. And it's sort of, we have this unique environment right now where we have a high amount, 27 million, that we could move out of the estate, and it's probably not going to be that high forever.
Yeah, it's definitely always changing. I want to go to Rabbi Lapin. You and Susan have raised 7 children. You have 30 grandchildren. What have you found to be helpful tools in building your family's legacy?
Andy, well, I said approximately 30 because 2 days ago I said 28, excepting that afternoon, one of our children told us that it was soon going to be 29. And so I don't actually know the precise detail, which I'm thrilled about. I love being able to say around about 30. And we come very much from a Hebrew tradition, and that means both culturally and biblically. And in practical terms, what that means is that we are very aware that in recent history and over lengthier history, it's happened many, many times, that Jewish communities have been uprooted and people taken away. So, for instance, various individuals I've interviewed for my book were people, for instance, the guy who created CVS pharmacies in the United States of America, witnessed his parents being killed in a Nazi death camp, met his wife directly after the war as a young man, and she had undergone similar horrors. And they eventually, via displaced persons camps in Vienna and in Cyprus, they make their way to the United States without anything except nightmarish memories of the past few years. And they get to work. And I don't have to tell you what the financial figures of CVS looks like. And so we place great emphasis not only on preserving and protecting wealth, but creating it in the first place. And we do that not only because we are very aware that that second or that third generation may not actually be fortunate enough. There were people who, in the middle of the 20th century, there were many, many people who had placed assets in Swiss banks as Hitler came to power in 32 and 33 and 34. And, by the end of the war, their children, and in some cases later on grandchildren, tried to recover those funds from various Swiss banks. And for various legal reasons, it's not worth going into detail here and now, they were unable to do so. And so starting over again, being able to actually make money is very much a part of the culture. And that's why my book was Thou Shalt Prosper. There's something intrinsically beneficial. And so we work very hard on making sure our children understand the nature of money, and not only understand how to make money, but even more fundamentally important is understanding the inherent morality and dignity and virtue of making money. And this is really important because, particularly now in an election season, you see a lot of this. Politicians are literally tumbling over their own toes in order to assure the electorate that they grew up in humble and modest circumstances. But why? What's so dishonorable about coming from a family that was able to build and acquire assets? Why has that got to be concealed? Why has everyone has to pretend to not have come from a moneyed background. It's topsy-turvy. It makes absolutely no sense at all. So obviously it indicates that people see something inherently reprehensible about money. And that's why you hear Kamala Harris, and I don't mind being political, and I'll say clearly, anybody who cares about money and their family, who makes the wrong vote in the I mean, it's quite unbelievable. Kamala Harris is very candid about the Marxist background she comes from. The Marxist background, her father was a deep Keynesian economist. She grew up in an atmosphere of regarding the making of money as reprehensible. Well, part of ancient Jewish wisdom is that nobody can succeed at doing anything that deep in your heart you consider to be morally reprehensible. And so if making money deep down disturbs you, well, how on earth are you ever going to be good at that? And so explaining and understanding and learning why it is that making money is positive. And this has a lot of good effects, because our daughters learned that one of the most important things about a young man is where he stands financially. And we were very emphatic about that. That doesn't make our daughter a gold digger. It makes her a smart woman who understands that a man's relationship with his money tells us a whole lot more than a man's relationship with his racehorse or his mistress or his sports car. So we start a little bit earlier than the area of transferring the wealth, or the legacy being very, very important. And James' comments about the fifth point, I think it was his pinky, that was the spiritual. We sort of tend to invert that and put that right up front. And maybe we have to define what spiritual means later on. But in a very large nutshell, Andy, that's kind of where I come from.
Thank you. Kirby, your thoughts on what's been discussed so far?
I don't even know where to begin. You've covered so many different bases, but I guess jumping in on the rabbi's comments, I would just add, we are at this interesting political season, and I want to share with you something that actually comes from John Adams. And he shared something in a letter to his wife, Abigail, dating back to 1780 while he was on a diplomatic mission in Paris. He was a wealthy man in his own right, thriving in his own law practice. And he actually wrote a letter saying, "I must study politics and war that our sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. Our sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain." And I bring this up because we as Americans come from a rich history of choice and opportunity. And it's in our DNA to actually want to build opportunity for the next generation. And I think it's incredibly important that we bring back this sense of opportunity and this aspiration that wealth is for this idea that we're passing it forward. And sometimes I think we miss this connection of bringing the opportunity that wealth brings choice. It brings freedom, it brings flexibility, and it brings creativity, innovation, and imagination. And back to Jay's whole point that, money is not the motivation, it's the means to all these other capitals that can be explored and opened up. And I think that is what, back to John Adams, he had that wisdom so early on. And maybe that's what we're kind of starting to open up right here.
Andy, if I could just take 1 minute, because we've all spoken. You asked about the Rockefellers, and I'd like to say that for those who go to Rockefeller Center at Christmas time and walk toward the ice rink, you will find a plaque there, quite a large bronze plaque about that big. And on it is John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s philosophy. And John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s philosophy was worked out with his father. And this was what it was. He said to his father in a series of conversations, he wanted to leave the family business. He was the only son, so in those days he was required to be on all the boards. Father had retired at 50. And the father said, well, what do you want to do, Junior? And he said, Father, I want to spend the rest of my life. He was in his 40s, late 40s, I believe. I want to spend the rest of my life growing a great family and doing philanthropy. That was the making of the Rockefellers. The second generation story, different than the first generation story. The first generation story of creativity, taking energy and making it matter, is a magnificent story. The really interesting story, in my view, is the second generation story of how does that matter continue to work positively in the world. And the son said, by growing a great family, flourishing, and doing philanthropy. Since, Andrew, you asked about the Rockefellers, I thought I should add the Rockefeller story.
Thank you for bringing it full circle. Appreciate the story. With that, let's go to segment 2.
Transferring wealth across generations starts with careful estate planning. A will provides instructions for distributing assets, but it must go through probate, which can be time-consuming and costly. For those looking to bypass probate and secure tax advantages, trusts may offer a reliable alternative. Options like revocable and irrevocable trusts allow more control over asset distribution and can shield wealth from legal claims. Charitable trusts, such as charitable remainder trusts or donor-advised funds, provide a way to support meaningful causes while offering tax benefits. These tools are valuable for individuals who want their legacy to include philanthropy. By understanding these estate planning tools, families can make informed decisions that align with their financial goals and values. Whether through a will, a trust, or a charitable giving plan, strategic planning ensures a smooth wealth transfer process, preserving assets for future generations while honoring personal values and aspirations.
Andrew, you've seen families in conflict or even destroyed by inheritances. What are some common pitfalls that families face when they don't do a comprehensive estate plan?
Yeah, we have a saying in the estate planning world that you never truly know a person till you share an inheritance with them. And my law partner and I, we wrote an article for Trust and Estates magazine a few years ago called Grats versus Gratitude. And all these tools that we're talking about, trusts, wills, all these things, to me, that's all they are, just tools. And I always hate just throwing them out there because the tools that I need to use to accomplish your goals for your family are going to be different than the other families that are on this call. So to me, choosing these things just depends upon on actually what you're trying to accomplish. We like to start sort of different. In Entrusted, our book, we talk about these entrusted families, the people that successfully navigate this wealth transfer beyond 3 generations. Is number one thing is they know who they are and what they believe. And I think that's, they know their core values. And not many families can say that these days. We used to be able to say that. You used to know what it meant to be part of your family. I mean, we think there needs to be 3 expectations that are clearly laid out for every member of the family. And everybody needs to know what can they expect from being part of the family. I mean, there's got to be a benefit to being part of your family and what common expectations come from that. Like, just as a corny example, we have a family ranch up in southwest Montana that everybody loves to go, and we've had amazing family reunions there, and it's a gathering place for the family. And everybody gets to be, use it as long as they clean it and treat it nice and so forth. And so it's a benefit from being part of our family. Everybody needs to know as a second expectation what they cannot expect from being part of the family. Like, just because I have some money in the bank doesn't mean you do, right? You're expected to work for it and be productive in your own life. And then they need to know what's expected of them. Every member of the family needs to lay that out. And so few families, they actually take the time to actually do that. And once I kind of know what the family dynamics are and what their goals are, then I can choose all these various tools. And yes, I believe that everybody ought to do some sort of an estate plan, literally from the age of 18. And what that estate plan needs to look like, the comprehensiveness to it, the complexities to it, is going to completely depend upon each family's individual circumstances.
Rabbi Lapin, given how common it is for a second generation or third generation to spend or deplete family wealth, it's not easy to prepare a family for the future. What can one do?
Well, starting much earlier than people think. Andrew spoke about creating some kind of plan already at the age of 18, and that sounds really, really good to me. But financial education and the understanding what money is and the role that it plays within society, I think has to start much, much earlier. And so some of the things I discuss with parents very often is, do you give children an allowance, or are they expected to do chores in exchange for that? And many parents, particularly parents who came from more straitened circumstances and who've now made good, are extremely reluctant to help children do that. But it's a horrible mistake, because if you think about it, it's a perverse thing. But the reality is that just in the nature of human psychology, we tend to be much more connected emotionally. We love much more those to whom we give than those from whom we receive. There's the famous story of Winston Churchill, who had loaned some money to a fellow who constantly was a thorn in his hide in the Parliament in Westminster. And after Churchill had loaned him some money, the guy turned all agreeable, and he never contradicted Churchill, never interrupted his speeches because he owed him money. And Churchill went up to him and said, "Look, if you don't go back to your old ways, if you don't pick up again doing everything you did and prickling at me, I'm going to take that money back. I'm going to demand it back instantly. I need you back the way you were." We all feel uncomfortable with those who have given us, but we feel very good to those whom we've given. And this is why it is that in some research I discovered that there's a number of cases in Los Angeles County of children who have evicted parents from properties owned by the children in which the parents were tenants. I was not able to find a single case of parents who had evicted a child. I'm sure it exists, but it was hard to find. My point is that not allowing your child to be givers, forcing your child to only be a taker, means you are increasing family tensions and ultimately resentment against the parent. That child is going to spend a lot of money on therapy later on, talking about how the parents ruined their lives. And so this is just an example of a really important fundamental principle from ancient Jewish wisdom, that you should start very early. Children, like before 10 years old, children should be already doing chores. Children should be helping around the house. Andrew spoke about what can be expected from a member of the family. And that's exactly what I'm coming down on. Absolutely. You're a member of this family. This is what you're expected to do. Here's how you're expected to do it. And here are ways in which you can earn money in this family. And you can also trade with your siblings. And so we believe that when people ask me, because people sometimes have just had a baby and they say jokingly, well, how soon should we start their financial education? And my answer is, you're 9 months late already. This is something that as soon as you were pregnant, you and your spouse should have been building up clarity and uniformity so that you were ready to start imparting a coherent message to your new offspring.
Great advice. Kirby, can you give us some insight into the families that you advise and family offices? How do you help families navigate tax implications of different estate planning tools?
Well, I'm not an estate planner, so I typically don't advise on estate planning tools. However, I do work intimately with counsel and oftentimes with a lot of family office professionals who are working with trusts and different kinds of estate planning techniques. And I think one of the key critical items is that oftentimes the technical professionals are not the teachers. And they're oftentimes asked to be the educators. And that's usually putting people in the wrong hot seat to be teaching about these complex techniques to lay people. And I think sometimes you have to help meet the learner where they are and put the experts in the right places where they are. And there's sometimes the need to bridge those domains. It doesn't necessarily mean you pay the $1,000 an hour technical professional to teach the layperson, the 15-year-old or the 18-year-old or the 22-year-old how to read their trust. There's a lot of other good resources that can help bridge those domains. And I also find that we waste valuable time in family meetings and one-on-one mentoring when you should be doing fun things, building relationships, doing cool activities, using talking head, which is the worst thing I think you can possibly do. Do not spend millions of dollars bringing in high-powered speakers when you should be doing trust falls and having wonderful experiences together. Use other valuable resources to teach the basics and mechanics of finance and investing. And that's where we found that there's a missed opportunity. I mean, we built a whole suite of learning coursework at Tamron Learning that is really accelerated families' way to jump in and get knowledgeable. So again, I think there's a missed opportunity oftentimes that families teach the wrong things at the wrong times through the wrong people. And then they try to make people focus on decisions when they're not prepared with the right information to make the decisions. And for me, that is one of the most frustrating things, to ask a beneficiary, do you think this is a good decision? How do you feel about the asset allocation that your trustee is making? And they're like, I don't even understand the basics of investing. Why are you asking me? So we need to be better about educating and informing before we ask people to participate. And we also need to ask the technical professionals, hey, if you're not comfortable doing this kind of mentoring, let's put a success team around the beneficiaries, the family members, and that fits them, and not put the technical professionals in those roles if that's not their comfort level.
Interesting. Sounds like it does require a team. And it's fascinating to hear how a trust fall or just an outing going go-karting or something can lay the groundwork to have more successful discussions and meetings.
Andy, would you like me to add something here?
Please do, Jay.
Thank you. 3 things that I think would be helpful. First, as my panelists and your squib, Andy, have shown us, the great problem for the second and later generation members of families is to integrate into their selves, human selves, an action of creation by someone else that has nothing to do with them at all. The core action of the first generation of a family is creation, taking energy and turning it into matter, something that is remarkably complex for a human being to do. But the second generation and every generation after that has an integration problem, don't they? Whatever comes to them from that first generation, in the sense of the matter that has come from that energy, they must integrate. The first and most important thing is to understand it has nothing to do with them and their integrity whatsoever. So they have an existential issue. Can they integrate into their lives successfully something created by someone else? That's an energetic problem for them. This is very rarely understood in our field, but it's critically important to the well-being. After all, wealth is well-being of that human being. Second, in a very practical way, which didn't come up, so I'm going to add it here, I do believe very much, as Rabbi has said and my panelists have said, I'm a great believer that children should pay for their own college, yes, with the parents' or grandparents' assistance, but that there is a huge learning at that critical stage of life by learning how to receive, because these are gifts, these are not responsibilities for college. The law is very clear. You have a duty to education in high school. but you have no duty for higher education. This is a gift. And as the rabbi has said, learning to receive gifts, oh my goodness, and not receive transfers. Without getting into that, I wrote a book about it. The difference between a transfer and a gift is enormous to the possible integration. One is love, one is head. And third point, for trust, since this was in the squib, the great question of trust is, can the beneficiary be accounted to? For what? The great answer is, does this trust enhance my life, not support it? And by the way, that will be the next 30 years of question in our field, because the state of Delaware has just passed legislation enabling people to have a well-being trust. This is an extraordinary moment in our world where the beneficiary has been put back into the right position in trust by being able to answer, did this trust help my well-being? I put that as, did it enhance my life?
Interesting. What is a well-being trust?
Well, Delaware has said you can now have this, which means that the beneficiary being concerned for the beneficiary's well-being is the condition of care. As my colleagues know, every trustee is measured first by care, then loyalty and impartiality, but first by care. What does care mean? Does it mean keeping good books and investing? No, those are subordinate functions. The superordinate function is, does the trust enhance the beneficiary's life? And by the way, Andy, for 30 years, I have never written a trust that had a distribution function. I've only written trusts that have an enhancement function. In fact, I'll go further and say, as Andrew knows, and I'm sure the rabbi knows, certainly Kirby does, I will not write a trust does not start saying it's a gift of love, and second, saying that it exists to enhance the lives of its beneficiaries. Of course not, because that's what the trustee is accountable for.
Yeah, Jay he's making a really important point here about the shift in how trusts are being viewed, because we're really going back to trusts can be traced back 800 years through Old English common law back to the Crusades, and it was this idea that the eldest son in the family, by right of primogeniture, was going to get all the property, but if he was 10 years old, somebody's going to come and take it from him. I mean, people weren't that excited about their kids having access to a lot of assets back then any more than we are now. And so, trust is just there's a whole bunch of different types of trust, but under modern law, they took the position, like Jay was just referring to, that it really was the primary goal of the trustee to keep books and make it have the most amount of income that it can possibly have. They had to make the assets productive and all of these various things. What this is now saying is that you can actually make purpose be the meaning behind the trust. What's the overall purpose behind it? And Delaware's codified it into this other thing. So it's really a change, and it's a change because of the demand. I mean, advisors, I don't care if you're an estate lawyer, a financial planner, or whatever, the demand in the marketplace is to have this conversation right now. We were presenting at an event down in San Diego, 500 advisors in the room, financial planners. And the very first thing that the speaker who came out said was that 91% of clients want their advisors to know their core values, who they are and what they believe. It's not that they need them to know what their net worth is, what is the number on that balance sheet. And it's an attempt to completely go towards what is the demand now of clients.
And Andy, coming back to my hand gesture, the pinky, Rabbi, this is spiritual capital, and spiritual capital is enhancement, well-being. Is the family working together to enhance each other's well-being? That's a spiritual question. And if it gets it right, purposing it, then it makes great decisions, the social capital together. It's a learning system. The human beings are thriving, and the financial capital has a purpose, growing these.
Yeah, I love the balance that's required, because we see that there are billionaires who are unhappy, and that's because their financial is fine, but the other elements are not. So we're going to move to segment 3.
Passing wealth across generations requires strategic planning and collaboration. A diversified investment portfolio is crucial for maintaining and growing family wealth over the long term. Spreading investments across asset types, such as stocks, bonds, and real estate, helps manage risk and supports stable growth. Rebalancing regularly keeps the portfolio aligned with financial goals, ensuring it evolves with market conditions and family needs. Involving younger family members in financial decisions is key to successful wealth transfer. Open discussions about investment strategies, risk management, and financial goals help to build financial literacy and foster a shared understanding of wealth management. Mentorship from one generation to the next strengthens this process, allowing younger members to gain hands-on experience while benefiting from the wisdom of their elders. By embracing a collaborative approach and establishing a sound investment strategy, families can ensure their wealth is responsibly managed and passed down, creating a legacy that endures for generations to come.
Kirby, have you had to deal with families to help them manage some of the generational tensions that can arise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the hardest things is that we have a lot of different ideas about what success looks like. And we live so much longer. I mean, if we think about longevity in genes, we are now living not in 2 or 3 generations, but in 4 generations. So that means we have to merge and co-create a thesis, right, around our thinking, around what these assets are supposed to do. And that thesis has to make sense, not to one generation, but now it has to sort of make sense to possibly 2 and 3 generations of adults, right? So we have adults that are in their 80s and 90s, maybe even centenarians. And then we have their children who are in their 40s, 50s, and 70s. And then we have their emerging adults in their 20s, teens, 20s, and 30s. So this is such an interesting time for the co-creation. And we know that the emerging adults are really concerned about things like social justice, our climate, their diversity and inclusion. So there's a lot of things related to ESG and impact investments that are very, very crucial and on the minds of the rising gen that they want to see in their portfolios. And sometimes in the older guards, they're not as considerate of those as priorities on the investment thesis. So I think oftentimes we have tensions on the investment fronts where we're trying to find alignment on what can we live with. And sometimes we don't always see eye to eye with the varying views of one generation and the other. And I think it's a healthy discourse, but it's also shows the very different generational lenses to what's priority, what's urgent, what's important, if we're thinking about like the Eisenhower matrix. And so that's a big challenge, I think, for a lot of these affluent families. But I think going back to the Rockefeller family, that's another great example of seeing the major shift and the power and the passion of that rising generation to put influence to say, hey, we're not going to invest right in oil. We're going to shift our whole investment thesis away. And there's been many families who have turned away from maybe where the core wealth was made if it wasn't made in an industry that was great for the environment, for example. And they have cut a course into a much healthier, sustainable type of investment strategy. So I do think sometimes the rising gen is bringing good change in the right direction.
It's good to see the evolution. Jay, what has been your experience when you have the difference in generations? Are there specific approaches that you found more effective in mentoring the younger family members?
Andy and panelists, I'm a great believer in the work of the Ericksons, Eric and Joan Erickson, who defined in their wonderful way the 8 stages of human life and then 9 late in life. What do they know? They know that those stages of life are natural, We evolve in certain ways, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, and biologically. And one of the great findings of the Ericksons was that as we move through those stages of life, there are polarities. The polarity is that if you live a stage of life well with the questions that are presented, let's say in your decision to be a partner in life, have a partner in your late 20s or 30s, how do you live? Do you then have a stage with children and nurture? What the Ericksons discovered, Andy, was that as you move through each stage, in polarity, there is a positive polarity and a negative polarity of that stage of life. I'm not going to define them. But what they said is if you don't move to the positive polarity and resolve the questions of that stage of life thoughtfully, then you are likely in the next stage to be dealing principally with the negative polarity. As an old man at 82, what I can say is that when you move from the 7th stage of generativity to the 8th stage of either integrity or despair, the Ericksons were very clear that if you live the stage of generativity fully, rather than stagnating in that stage of life, you will move to the pleasant work of integrity of self rather than die in despair. So what I try to help families do and have throughout all my practice is to ask each other when they meet, what stage of life are you in? Not physically, but emotionally and in thought, who is the person I'm meeting? What are likely to be the core questions of his or her life today? And how can I engage with them to enhance the possibility that the resolution of those questions for them in that stage will be positive? This is how great families work. They acknowledge where each other is in their development and in their stage of life. This is natural. This is biologically natural. This is evolving the psychological and spiritual nature of a flourishing family in a holistic way. What's interesting to me, and then I'll finish this little part, is this. Earlier in this conversation, I said the great problem is of integration of something created by someone else. It's external. If you're living the stage of life well, in which you are facing that integration question, you are very likely to deal with it well and deal with it well for the rest of your life. If you are not living that stage well, the integration problem will overwhelm you. Enough said.
Andrew, in the last segment, you started speaking about the importance of core values, identifying the core values of the family. Can you also share why is it that stories and family lore are important to this process?
Yeah, so we talk about this in the second book we wrote, Riveted, 44 Values That Have Changed the World. And, you know, your core values have come about based upon your life experience. And, you know, if I listed my top 5 core values, everybody would think they're admirable. Andy, you've got your 5 core values. There's a 1 in 15 million chance, though, that you and I have the same top 5 core values. And it's because we've had different life experiences. Like, just as an example, one of my top core values is honesty, which sounds pretty dishonest coming from a lawyer, but I mean it. And it's because early on in our lives, there was a member of our family that was really dishonest to us, or dishonest with us. And in some ways, we're still dealing with those family dynamics even to this day. You know, we go to Thanksgiving dinner and there's tension between family members. But, you know, if I'm having this conversation with my family and my kids are involved and I'm saying, look, honesty is really important to me and this is why, well, I'm talking about family lore. Everybody used to sit around the dinner table or the campfire, if you go back that far, and talk about who they were and what that meant. Nobody does that anymore. We're all on our devices. This forces that conversation, and it's telling them about me. I'm not doing it in a preachy way. I'm not saying, you know, my son Thomas, you were so dishonest last week, shame on you. I'm just saying this is why it's important. It tells them why if they, you know, get in a car accident in my car, and I'm gonna get upset, yeah, but we've got insurance. But if they lie to me about it, you know, I'm gonna go nuclear. right? So it's and if you imagine each member of the family doing that with their top 5 core values and explaining why that isn't so important, now you are really putting that that meat behind who you are as a family, who each member of the family is. In fact, we have a whole separate company, Cornology, that helps families through this. And like in my marriage, my wife and I have done this in the reverse. Not only what are my core values, but what are the values I see that she brings to the table? What are those 5 core things? And what an powerful conversation that was when we had it. And I'm saying, look, I think, loyalty is one of your, top values, Candace. And these are the reasons why. And, from pulling from our marriage over the last 22 years, it's just an empowering conversation. And it's, it's done in a completely non-confrontational way. But core values, they change. I think Jay had referred to this earlier. I mean, your core values through your life experience as you reach these stages in life are definitely going to change. It's important to revisit this on a typical basis. But really, I think there's 3 erosive effects when it comes to wealth transfers. Why don't that make it to the 3rd generation? And number 1 is the division of the estate, right? If you take a family that's worth $100 million and they have 4 children who have 4 children who have 4 children, by the time the money gets down to the great-grandchild level alone, just from division, everybody's getting a little more than $390,000. And you just can't do and get investments and so forth with 390,000 that you can with 100 million. So how do you keep the family assets, together? And Rockefeller, Vanderbilt's, Rothschilds, they've kind of taken that family bank mentality. The second erosive effect are estate taxes, right? This is kind of where the advisors come in, and how can we make sure every generation isn't getting a 40% haircut or 55% haircut, whatever it might be. And then the third erosive effect are creditors taking the assets and then the misuse of the assets by the beneficiaries. And that's what we're all talking about here, right? Is that last one, the misuse of the assets. So any kind of a true legacy plan needs to effectively deal with those erosive effects.
Rabbi Lapin, we've been discussing this, transfer of wealth. Definitely, it requires, legal documents. It requires skilled investments. It requires sophisticated tax strategies. With your spiritual lens, what else is there?
Well, first of all, Andy, if we're going to use the term spiritual, let me tell you what the definition of that term is for me when I use it. First of all, spiritual has absolutely nothing to do with God, religion, piety, virtue, sin, or anything else at all. Spiritual simply means it's the opposite of material or physical. Spiritual is something that cannot be measured in a laboratory. And we have spiritual concerns in much the same as we have physical concerns. My physical concerns, at its most fundamental, are to make sure that I get enough oxygen and enough water and enough food, shelter. My concerns on a spiritual level are about things that cannot be measured in a lab. Everything else I've spoken about so far can. A quantity of, so much volume of oxygen, so much weight of food, so much liquid volume of water. But the other things that concern me are love, loyalty, integrity, resilience. And those are things that I want to make sure that my children get, just as certainly as I make sure that they get oxygen and water and food. But of course, those things are considerably more difficult to deliver than the straightforward physical commodities necessary for life. So that then becomes hugely important, and a lot of it revolves around very real life lessons early on. So around the dinner table with even young children, how do you get money? You want money because you asked me if you can have something. That takes money to get. Where does money come from? How do you get it? It's a huge eye-opener. even with young children, and this can always be done in a very age-appropriate way. But it's a huge eye-opener when I explain that, look, there are two ways to get money. One is by holding a .357 Magnum stainless steel Swiss & Wesson revolver. That's one way of getting it. And you point it at people, and you'll find that most people will give you money. The only other way is to get them to deliver it consensually. And the only way to do that is to provide to them goods or services that are more valuable than the money they part with to give to you. Now, that is a huge thing, because it even impacts on some of the things we've already discussed in this meeting. For instance, the Rockefeller quote that he doesn't want to make money anymore. He now wants to dwell on philanthropy. Well, bully for him. But anybody who has been active in philanthropic circles discovers how incredibly difficult it is to give people money without spoiling things for them, without making things worse for them. And we only have to look and see what has been the result to the lives of lottery winners. I mean, there have been books written on it because it is such a staggering phenomenon. It is difficult to find a lottery winner whose life has improved, because giving money to people is fraught with terrible peril. And as a matter of fact, receiving money can be eroding to the soul. As I mentioned earlier, parents do far more for children than children ever do for parents. Not surprisingly, parents love children with unconditional love very often, but children don't necessarily love their parents with unconditional love. I did a program for nearly 200 therapists a couple of years ago, and one of the questions I asked them in one of the sessions is, I want you to write down on a piece of paper, pass them to the front, the top 2 or 3 issues that people come and talk to you about. And you won't be shocked to hear that the number one issue for virtually all these 150, 200 therapists was how my parents ruined my life. Now, anybody who's actually had children knows that it's kind of the other way around. I mean, children arrive, and yes, it's beautiful and it's lovely, but just a lot of the things you thought were an integral part of your life, well, they go out the window. So if anybody ruins anybody's life, it's not parents ruining children's life, it's the other way. But parents never go and pay $200 an hour to a therapist to complain how their children ruin their lives. It's the other way around. And so making sure that these things are imparted as part of the internal spiritual schematic in a child can't be done too early. And that's why, I mean, I teach clients all the time. The time to start worrying about transfer is not when you have an exit for your company and you know you go away with $100 million of private equity money. No, that's too late, because handing over money is easy. Doing it without damaging your family is very, very difficult. As everybody in this meeting knows, that's why you all get paid the big bucks to try and solve some of these problems. But a lot of them can be headed off at the pass by raising your family correctly from the youngest, earliest age, so that afterwards, the more mechanical process of creating the right legal instruments and setting up the right tax strategy, that's relatively easy, because you can go and talk to any of the professionals in this meeting and they'll do it for you. But nobody else can make your family a fit recipient for your largesse. Only you can do that. And it can't be done as part of your retirement. It has to be done way earlier, because we all absorb our spiritual schematics long before we turn 18.
My children have enriched my life, but nobody said that enrichment process would be easy.
Can I clarify just one thing? So the rabbis referred to this a couple of times. When I said 18, I mean that's when people should start putting together some of these legal documents. No, I am absolutely on the same board as Rabbi here with when kids should be involved. I mean, I lived this in my family. I was included in family meetings with financial planners and CPAs at the age of 5 years old. And I was expected to sit there and just absorb what was going on, and I could ask questions. Yeah, and to Kirby's point, it may have been boring, and we also did fun stuff, but it was really an important part of me by the time I was 18 years old, being leaps and mounds ahead of my colleagues. They hadn't had these kind of meetings and these discussions. So include them as young as you possibly can. I agree 100%.
Andy, to put a little levity into this very difficult subject, the Buddhists, of which I am one, believe that children choose the parents. I have found this is very helpful in conversations.
I love it. We're going to go to segment 4.
Legacy planning goes beyond transferring financial assets. It also involves passing down family values and traditions. Establishing trust can help protect wealth while ensuring it's distributed according to the family's wishes. Trusts bypass probate, offer tax benefits, and allow for customized terms, such as staggered disbursements to heirs over time. This structure provides control over how and when assets are passed on, helping to preserve wealth for future generations. Responsible investing is another crucial element. Incorporating environmental, social, and governance criteria into investment choices aligns financial growth with family values. For families who prioritize philanthropy, donor-advised funds or charitable trusts enable strategic giving, allowing them to support meaningful causes over time. By integrating family values into wealth transfer strategies, families can build a legacy that reflects their beliefs and promotes unity. Regular family discussions about these values can ensure that future generations uphold the traditions and principles that define the family's legacy.
Jay, in counseling families, you frequently talked about Sigmund Freud and money. Why?
Such an important question. The integration question is the one that Freud was dealing with. How do you enable a human being to integrate something that is alien to his or her reality? This is the question I think we must address, as I've said a couple of times today. This is the one that we miss because the transfers occur legally, they do not occur spiritually. They occur as transfers, they do not occur as gifts. With respect to the wonderful rabbi that I'm sharing today, and I'm deeply grateful to meet you, sir.
Likewise.
The great tradition of Maimonides about what it is to make a gift as opposed to a transfer has been of deep, deep value to me. The idea that we give grudgingly as a transfer, all too often, the estate planning is a transfer. If it isn't a gift, it won't work. So the question is, what is in the intention of the meteor from outer space? What was put into it when it comes into the integrity of that human being? This is the question that all of us must be concerned about when we are in the field of assisting human beings in integrating something into themselves that is not natural to them.
Andy, can I add to that?
Please do.
I want to add that I think there's another element, which is the relational capital. And I think what oftentimes gets very complicated with that gift or that exchange or that transfer is that money and wealth transfer gets very confused, especially when it's passed between an elder, be it a parent or a grandparent, and a next gen or a grandchild. And so we confuse in that relationship it starts to value the relationship. And so this becomes extraordinarily charging. Okay. So when relationship capital was just the exchange of love, nurture, support, care, consideration, and now we bring a monetary value into it, that charges it. Okay. And it now creates an energetic field different than it was when it was just emotional, social capital, right? We've talked about that earlier. And so that informs to the child who's receiving that wealth a stigma. It could be positive or it could be negative. And money doesn't have a value in terms of emotional value, except what that child ascribes to it. And that is very, very powerful in that moment when they ascribe what that relationship to money means to them and who that recipient was that's imparting that wealth to them. And so this is something that most grantors never think about when they think they're doing something so wonderful. Like, I'm imparting this gift or this wealth transfer to you. And to the purposeful trust mentality, we want this to impart wonderful goodness and opportunity. But if there's something deeply dark or traumatic in that child's life that is missed by a parent or a grandparent, we don't know how it's, to the media reference that Jay is talking about, we don't know how it's going to impact them when that wealth actually hits them. We don't know what that's going to trigger. So there's all this psychology that's behind this exchange that we have to really understand, that the estate planning is this mechanical work that gets done to just physically make the assets go from one to the other. But then there's all this psychological impact that happens too, that sometimes we don't think about. We don't really quantify or qualify, that has just as much importance, quite honestly, in the success of the transfer as the mechanics of the estate plan. And I oftentimes think this is a big, big missed opportunity that families fail to truly unpack and do right.
Andy, let me just quickly, so that Andrew and Rabbi Daniel can speak, add one thing from Freud. I purposely went a different direction, but I do want to answer your question. Late in life, Freud said that the happiest people, he used adjusted because he's a psychologist, I'll use happiest, eudaimonia, the deep happiness, that the happiest people were those who learned to love. By the way, learned to love, that's very interesting, and learned to work. The question the rabbi has raised of work as vocation. Freud did not mean labore, he meant vocare, not labor, but vocation. What am I called to do in this life? Learning to love, learning to work. And then he said, what you were seeking from me, the two great interferers in happiness are sex, which he included gender, and then comes the last one, money. And he said, money is the most difficult of all because no nice person will speak of it. I did want to put that back into the tape since you asked me. He's absolutely right. My entire experience is that he was absolutely right. Hard to be a pioneer because Jung came along and fixed up a lot of things, but he was right on this one. Love and work, sex and money. And money's the most difficult because no nice person will speak of it.
Andrew, you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I'm actually going to talk about a couple of things that were discussed just in terms of Jay. The old saying is, to be truly happy in life, you have to have someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for. And a lot of times these estate plans that I see, most of them, even if a client has them, they destroy all of that by just dumping it onto their kids when they reach the age of 25 or 30 or whatever. From a practical standpoint, kind of going back to what Kirby was talking about, I mean, trusts are absolutely just a tool, but they are a very vital tool. In my trust that I do for clients, I don't give anything outright to the kids, ever. It stays in trust for the kid's entire lifetime. Now, at some point in time, we might allow the kids to be in control of the trust, but there's 3 reasons to do that. 2 objective ones and 1 subjective one that we're talking about today. Objectively being, number 1, by leaving the assets in trust, you can try to keep it out of their estate. for estate tax purposes. You can generationally skip it. And these high net worth families, they have multiple generations of wealth. And so how do we make sure that that estate tax, again, doesn't erode everything? So the other objective fact reason is you keep it away from any bad actors that might come into a child's life, right? If when a child turns 25, they just get their inheritance out of their trust, well, it's theirs. They commingle it with marital funds. It could get wrapped up in a divorce and it would be taken by a creditor. By leaving it in a trust for their entire lifetime, they're the beneficiaries of the trust. Nobody else is. I mean, they literally could declare a bankruptcy, come out the other side of the bankruptcy with the assets mom and dad left them entirely intact. But then the third subjective reason is what we're talking about today, right? The trust is where you put in with a purpose, right? How is it going to be governed after mom and dad on this planet any longer, or why mom and dad are on this planet, right? How, who's going to govern, how are they going to govern, and what are the parameters? Well, if at 25, the assets just go outright to the kids, that's a bunch of words on paper. So I think the trust is a very, very important vehicle to accomplish a lot of what we're talking about today.
Thank you for that. Rabbi Lapin, why is moral ambivalence about money so common? And how does that make this transfer from one generation to the next more daunting?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I mean, obviously there is ambivalence about it. As James just said, nice people, quoting Sigmund Freud, nice people don't talk about money. The Lapin corollary to that is that not nice people don't stop talking about sex. And that is a reality. These two areas, sex and money, are two of the 5 areas that are fundamentally necessary for human happiness. And again, part of the Pentateuchal concept in Judaism, but those are family, finances, friendship. I call them the 5 F's. I have a book called The Holistic View on this. Family, finance, friendship, fitness, and faith. And faith incorporates the spiritual. Family is not only Uncle Fred and Aunt Agatha, but family is also embodies male-female relationships, because the only reason that you have all your uncles and aunts and all your cousins at that great Thanksgiving retreat at the family getaway is because many, many years ago, grandpa and grandma caught one another's eyes and later found ecstasy in one another's arms. Sex is what creates family. It's absolutely impossible to separate. And conversely, removal of sex from family was a massive development in the history of humanity, that there is a place where sexual relationships are taboo, is precisely in order to make sure that other actions and other productive behaviors will occur. In other words, if sex between brothers and sisters was acceptable and normal and common, then the notion that any guy is actually going to do any homework during his high school years is laughable. And so the attempt was to desexualize, and again, this is part of the thinking of many faiths and many religions as well. And so these 2 areas, sex and money, obviously crucially important, and furthermore, understanding the nature of spirituality and to circle back to why there is so much moral ambivalence about money, why it is that from the highest to the low, the highest try and pretend that they're not really that wealthy, and the lowest have difficulty asking for their pay and for their wages because they feel awkward. The fundamental problem is the removal of a spiritual reality. The fundamental question is money physical or spiritual? And you look at that piece of green paper in your wallet and you say, well, there it is. It's obviously physical, or the metal discs clinking in your pocket. I mean, it's physical. There it is. You can touch it and measure it. The truth is you can't. And you may well be able to take $1,000 out of a hole in the wall that you discovered while you were doing bathroom renovations, and it turns out grandpa stuck $1,000 in the wall back in 1937. Well, he thought he was giving you a lot of money, but he didn't reckon on inflation. And so although the physical nature of that money, namely, $10, $100 bills, that hasn't changed. But the essence of money is not its material reality. The essence of money is what it represents, and that is entirely spiritual. And there is no objective way of knowing that other than for two human beings to agree. And it's only human beings that can establish the value of anything. Now, why this is so important is because on a physical level, and I'll bring this in for a quick landing, on a physical level, things can only occupy one point on the space-time continuum. That's why, of course, you don't bump into yourself if you go to Union Station again where you were last year. Time and space are very closely linked, as somebody else of the early 20th century said, and that was Albert Einstein. The idea is that a book is a physical object. It can't be in two places at the same time. And so if I have a book in front of me and I turn away for a moment, when I turn back, the book is in front of Andy. And I quickly look at check and I see it's still got that same tribute from the author to me in the front jacket. He took it. That's all there is. And you took my book. It's perfectly obvious. It's inevitable. Well, if money is a physical object and I have a whole bunch of it, then that means that there are a whole lot of you who do not have enough of it. If money is physical, then my ownership of a lot is more than my fair share. Kamala Harris said just the other day, when she was asked on a news program, how will she pay for her lavish and generous spending program? She says, it's easy. I'm going to make the rich pay their fair share. The problem, of course, is that rich is undefined. And so they'll come for your neighbor today, but it'll be you tomorrow. And fair is a word that has absolutely no definition. So when politicians say we want the rich to pay their fair share, it's a really wonderful prescription, because it means that they will define who are the rich and how much is the fair share. So why is there so much moral ambivalence about money? Because something that's happened since the early 60s, and it's been very, very visible sociologically and spiritually and even militarily and economically, is a huge decline in spiritual understanding, spiritual awareness in the United States. The old Speaker of the California House, Willie Brown, once said, if I can't wear it, eat it, drive it, or make love to it, I'm not interested. Basically, what he was spelling out was the formula of materialism. If I can't measure it in a lab or use it in any other way, it doesn't exist. Well, that means money must be physical as well. If money is physical, then my possession of it means somebody else doesn't have it. If money is in fact spiritual, it is capable of being created by unique human ingenuity. And this is exactly why academics have so much trouble with the fundamental question on which the Nobel Prize for Economics was just given two days ago. And that is, why do some countries financially flourish while others flop? And it always boils down to culture, which is just another way of saying spiritual realities.
Thank you for
terribly
the insight.
Moral ambivalence about money fundamentally comes from an inability to understand or to see money as something spiritual, not material.
Thank you for the insight. Rabbi Lapin adding a little spice, talking both politics and sex in this segment. We're going to wrap it up and go to the last segment.
Securing a family's legacy through intergenerational wealth transfer involves more than passing down assets. It requires preparing heirs to responsibly manage and grow that wealth. Financial education is fundamental. ensuring that each generation understands key concepts like budgeting, investing, tax planning, and risk management. Regular family meetings help align everyone on the family's financial goals and values, fostering open communication and transparency. Early involvement of younger family members in wealth management builds their confidence and skills. Through mentorship, they can gain hands-on experience, learning how to make informed decisions about investments and other financial matters. Additionally, a well-structured succession plan is crucial, especially for families with business interests. This plan should clearly outline roles, responsibilities, and the process for transitioning leadership. Working with a team of financial advisors, estate planners, and tax specialists can simplify the wealth transfer process. By combining professional guidance with strong family values, families can ensure their legacy is both preserved and adapted to meet future needs.
Kirby, you established Tamarind Learning. How can family offices facilitate the ongoing financial education of family members?
That's a great question. So I think all families tend to want to lean into learning because we always need to learn more to grow our family capital. I think Jay started us off with, right, this is not enough. We really need to look at all the capitals to continue to flourish as a family. So financial literacy is the foundation, but there's so much more, and we need to grow the whole person. And not everybody in our family are going to be operators necessarily. So we need to cultivate the capital in our family to support the artists, to support all the different kinds of, types of people that are going to be in our family. But we also have to understand that everybody in our family needs to know the basics so that when they are working with the estate planning attorney, they understand what they're talking about, and they understand how to read the terms in their trust, and they know the parties to the trust. When they're working with their financial advisor, they understand what their financial plan looks like, and they understand how to live within their means, and they understand how to work on a budget. When they're working with their investment advisor, they understand what their asset allocation looks like, and they understand how to read their investment reports. So I think Tamarind Learning provides just one tool in the multitude of learning resources out there. But what we love about it is that it's virtual. It's something people can access anywhere, anytime, and it can complement their existing advisor, their family office resources, their current banker, their current investment advisor. And it's something that, again, we built because we saw this gap in the resources that are out there. And it complements any of the other learning resources that you might be as a go-to. So again, we believe that learning is critical to flourishing families wherever you are, if you're beginning your journey or you're well into your learning plan.
Andrew, you talked about leaving funds in a trust for future generations. How important is it for families to prepare their heirs, those beneficiaries, emotionally and financially for the responsibilities of wealth?
Absolutely critical. I mean, that's the second principle in our book, Entrusted, right? First principle is entrusted families know who they are and what they believe. But the second principle is that entrusted families prepare the family for the wealth, not the wealth for the family. And too often in all of the planning that I'm sure everybody on the panel here has seen, it's the reverse. We're just preparing the wealth and again, no thought about the consequences.
Thank you. Rabbi Lapin, you mentioned your many children and grandchildren. What is your desire? Do you want them to live off of your legacy? Do you want them to become philanthropists? Or do you want them to continue building something of their own?
Well, they've been raised and they're raising their children with the understanding that there is something inherently worthy about making money. As a matter of fact, we totally reject the idea that philanthropy is almost the modern day version of the old time pirates of the Caribbean retiring with their ill-gotten gains after a career of rape and plunder, and then building a cathedral to buy their way back into a polite society. So no, we don't see philanthropy as a way And I hate it when news commentators speak about a major philanthropic give. Oh, how lovely it is to see him giving back to society. I abhor that comment, because see what it means about what he was doing to society while he was making the money in the first place. Back to the materialism of money, the idea that making money you're actually taking from society. But if you give it back in the form of philanthropy, oh, great, now you're doing something perfect. We see charity as a completely separate obligation. And as far as the money you're making is concerned, you are doing value to society while you're making it. Because unlike the government, which has the power to extract money from you by force, as a business professional, the only way you have of getting people to part with their money is to make them happy, to give them more than the money is worth to them, which is a net positive for society. And so one of the things we tell our children is, look, if you've got a choice, if you've got $5 million and your choice is to give it away or use it to found and create a new profitable business, there's very little doubt in my mind that you're doing more good for more people by creating a business that benefits its customers, who voluntarily become its customers, and benefit its vendors and suppliers and everybody else. So part of what we put across is very much the inherent dignity and morality of the act of making money.
Mm-hmm. Jay, how can families create a sense of shared responsibility among heirs while honoring individual contributions?
All of us seek to be recognized as selves. The great question of our world is, can I find one other person or a community to which I am prepared to make a particular promise? I am prepared to promise that person or that community that I will help them no matter what. What I cannot know is whether they will help me. But inherent in my decision to help them is the hope that they will help me. This is the bond of the creation of family. Two people make a promise, and this goes back to every culture on earth. You need two people to have a family, a single family household, but you need two for a family. Two for a family means those two people and those who choose by affinity, not blood, by affinity to join that family, because the first two are affinity, not blood. It's a very important differentiation. Those two people, when they get up and pledge to be together for their lives, make a promise to each other, I will help you no matter what. Selfishly, myself with a big S, hopes you will do the same for me, but one cannot know. Family begins without knowing. Yes, there is sex, I agree, and a connection. But the core question of whether we will help each other cannot be known. It's an existential question, the most important question in our lives. We make that promise to another very, very rarely because of the depth of it that we intend to keep that promise. Family begins with that promise. It begins with the willingness to say, I will help you no matter what, and the hope that you will help me. And those who then join that family by affinity, not when they're born into it, no, they haven't joined it yet. When they come to the point where they decide to join that family, it is a question of affinity, positive connection, in which they say, I can make the same promise. Great families are those where every generation horizontally rises to awareness, and at the awareness level decides, I'll join here because I believe it is in my self-interest to do so. But in order for myself to be recognized, I will promise all others in that system that I will help them unconditionally. This is family.
Well, thank you, Inspired Moneymakers, for joining this powerful discussion. Clearly, legacy planning, practical tips on estate planning, wealth transfer. We talked a lot about different things. And I think for me, the big takeaway from this conversation is the importance of intentionality when it comes to generational wealth, whether it's passing financial assets on to the next generation or preserving family values and traditions. Success doesn't happen by accident. It requires careful planning, clear communication, and really a commitment to educating future generations. I want to leave all of the viewers and listeners with a call to action this week. Set aside some time to have a family conversation about your financial goals and values. And whether it's with your spouse, your children, your parents, start the conversation on what kind of legacy you want to build and how you can work together to achieve it. Please check out the resources and books from today's amazing panelists, James E. Hughes Jr., Kirby Rosplock, Andrew Howell, Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Let me share their links so that you can follow them and get more information. You can find Jay at jamesehughes.com. Kirby Rosplock, her books, The Complete Family Office Handbook and The Complete Direct Investing Handbook. You can find her at tamarind.partners.com. Kirby, there's Tamarind Learning also. Is that tamarindlearning.com? Okay, hopefully I have that right.
You got that right.
Okay, thanks. Andrew Howell, co-author of Entrusted, Building a Legacy That Lasts. He mentioned his book, Riveted. You can find him at yorkhowell.com. And Rabbi Daniel Lapin, Thou Shalt Prosper. You can find him at rabbidaniellapin.com. Rabbi did have one promo code, Andy Wong 50, for $50 off the Financial Prosperity Collection. If you use that code, you can get that at wehappywarriors.com/store. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. The next Inspired Money episode will be investing in real estate, opportunities and considerations for wealth building. That's on October 23rd at 1 p.m. Thank you to all our panelists for their time, their insights, and spending time with us today. Much appreciated. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thanks, everyone.